My name is Emily. I used to think love meant trust, and trust meant putting both our names on the deed to our dream home. I never imagined that the very signature I gave in good faith would one day be used against me. One night, I walked past the study and heard my mother-in-law's voice through the door. "She's just a placeholder. Once the house is fully paid, we'll get rid of her." That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't cry. I started planning. Because they may have built a trap for me. But they forgot. I signed the papers. And I never sign anything without reading the fine print. If you're watching this, don't forget to like and subscribe. The way this ends will leave you breathless. I met Daniel on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. He wasn't my type. Too polished, too confident, too charming for someone who claimed to be just another guy in finance. But there was something about him. The way he looked at me like I was the only woman in the room, the way he listened like I mattered, that made me lower my guard far too quickly. We met at a mutual friend's engagement party. He said he hated those events, said he only came because the groom owed him money. He made me laugh that night, real, belly-aching, snort laugh kind of laugh. And that was my first mistake. 2 weeks later, we were inseparable. Daniel was the kind of man who always had a plan. Our first date, a private cooking class. Our second, a surprise boat ride on a lake just outside the city. By the third week, he'd already introduced me to his best friend and casually mentioned that he could totally see himself marrying someone like me. It was intoxicating, dangerous even, but no one warns you when the red flags are wrapped in romantic gestures. He asked me to move in after 3 months. Why waste money on 2 places when we're practically living together anyway? He said, I remember blushing and saying yes. I thought I was lucky. I thought this was what love was supposed to feel like, fast, passionate, effortless. Looking back now, I realize I wasn't falling in love. I was being studied, groomed, positioned. The house was stunning, a 3-bedroom colonial just outside the city. Freshly painted white walls, brand new floors, a cozy fireplace. I remember standing in the empty living room, my voice echoing as I said, "It feels too perfect." Daniel smiled. "That's because it is. It's ours." He made it sound like we were building a future together, like this house was a symbol of us. But everything was already in motion. The loan pre-approved, the seller secured, the papers ready. The only thing he needed was me. Specifically, my credit score. You see, Daniel had recently switched jobs. His finances were in transition, as he put it. Mine, on the other hand, impeccable. Stable job, no debt, clean history. He said it was just a formality, that both our names would be on the deed, but mine would make the process smoother. I should have asked more questions. Instead, I signed. The day we got the keys, Daniel's mom, Margaret, came over with a bottle of wine and a smug smile. "Look at you two, playing house already," she said, scanning the place like she owned it. I laughed it off, tried to charm her. I wanted to be the daughter-in-law she could be proud of. Margaret wasn't warm, but she wasn't cold either, just critical, subtly so. She'd say things like, "Emily, maybe don't hang those curtains. They'll look cheap in photos." Or, "Are you sure you want to put your name on something this expensive? What if things don't work out?" Looking back, I should have heard the warning in her voice. The first cracks started to show within the first 6 months. Daniel became distant, not cold, not mean, just absent. He started working later, spending weekends golfing with clients. His phone, once an open book, suddenly had passcodes. He'd say I was being paranoid, that I needed to trust more. Margaret, meanwhile, became a fixture in our lives. She'd show up unannounced, critique my cooking, reorganize the kitchen because it made more sense. Daniel always defended her. "She's just trying to help, babe." But I noticed things, little things, like how my family photos were moved into drawers, or how Daniel's voice softened when he spoke to her, like a child begging for approval. Or how the deed, once promised as joint, now had my name alone on the loan. But his on the title. I confronted him once. Why is your name the only one listed on the ownership papers?" He shrugged. "It's a technical thing. My lawyer said it's easier this way for tax purposes. You still live here. It's ours." I believed him. I wanted to believe him, because what was the alternative? That the man I loved was conning me. Then came the night that changed everything. It was nearly midnight. I was coming downstairs for a glass of water when I heard voices from the study. The door was slightly ajar. I froze when I heard Margaret's voice. "She's just a placeholder, Daniel. She signed everything already. Once the mortgage is steady, we can move on." Silence, then Daniel's voice, low, tired. "I know, just give it a few more months." I didn't breathe. My legs were trembling. My fingers dug into the banister so hard, I thought the wood would splinter. I backed away, went upstairs, and locked the bedroom door behind me. I didn't sleep that night, didn't confront him. Instead, I started planning. The next morning, I smiled like nothing happened. I made breakfast, kissed him goodbye, and waited for him to leave for work. Then I went straight to a lawyer. Turns out, signing a loan doesn't make you the owner. The deed matters more. And while my name was listed on the loan, the house wasn't legally mine. Not yet, but there was a clause, one that could change everything, one that he had overlooked. Because while Daniel had been busy scheming, I had insisted on one thing when we signed: that both our names appear on a shared trust, created for our future family. And that trust, it included a clause that required mutual consent for any future sale or transfer. Daniel had locked me out of the ownership, but I still held the lock to the future. And that was my first weapon. I didn't cry. That night, after hearing their conversation through the crack in the door, I didn't let myself fall apart. No sobbing into my pillow. No midnight calls to best friends. No rage, just silence. Cold, terrifying silence. Because somewhere deep inside, I knew, if I showed even a flicker of emotion, they'd win. I sat at the edge of our king-sized bed, listening to the steady hum of the ceiling fan. Daniel slept beside me like nothing had happened. Like he wasn't conspiring to erase me from the very life we had built together. I looked at him, really looked at him. The curve of his back, the slight snore, the hand resting over my pillow like some loving gesture. All of it disgusted me. That was the moment something in me shifted. I stopped being Emily, the doting wife who made lemon chicken on Thursdays and worried if the throw pillows matched the rug. I became someone else. Someone he never saw coming. The next day, I made coffee like usual. French press, just the way he liked it. I even added a touch of cinnamon, which I knew he'd comment on. "You spoil me," he said with a grin, leaning in to kiss my forehead. I kissed him back and smiled. I felt like I was kissing a mask, or maybe I was the one wearing it now. As soon as he left for work, I grabbed my laptop and opened a spreadsheet. I listed everything: the loan documents, the trust agreement, the deed, my emails with the real estate agent, all our shared bank accounts, a separate column titled, "Things He Thinks I Don't Know." That last one grew fast. I started documenting everything, every conversation, every suspicious transaction, every whisper between Daniel and Margaret when they thought I wasn't listening. I bought a burner phone, created a new email address, started taking photos of documents and backing them up in cloud storage under a fake name. I even bought a tiny voice recorder and hid it behind the bookshelf in the study. For weeks, I became invisible. To Daniel, I was still his doting wife. I even pretended to get excited when he started talking about restructuring our finances, or maybe selling the house later down the line. I nodded, made him cookies, kissed his cheek, but inside I was coiled like a spring. One evening, I came back from a fake yoga class and found Daniel on the phone. His voice was low but firm. "No, not yet. She's still being cooperative. Just give it a little more time." A pause. "I know what I'm doing. Once she signs the modification, we're golden." Another pause. "Yeah, then we split it 60-40. You get the place, I get the rest." I felt my knees go weak. This wasn't just Daniel and Margaret anymore. There was someone else, another woman, and not in the romantic sense, no. This was financial. Cold, ruthless. He was setting up a deal, one where I was the sacrifice. That night, I moved $20,000 from our joint savings into a separate account under my maiden name. It wasn't illegal. I earned most of that money anyway. And besides, I'd need it soon. I also made an appointment with a second lawyer, not the one I'd seen before. This one specialized in marital asset fraud and quiet divorces. "You're not the first woman this has happened to," she said, flipping through my documents. "But you might be the first one to fight back this smart." Her words felt like oxygen. Over the next few weeks, I built a persona. On the surface, I became the perfect wife again. I asked Daniel about his day. I laughed at his jokes. I even let Margaret redecorate the guest room. But behind the scenes, I started visiting open houses in neighborhoods Daniel didn't even know I liked. I joined real estate forums. I opened a P.O. box and registered a new LLC. I wasn't just planning to leave. I was planning to own everything they tried to take from me. Then came the night I knew I was ready. We were having dinner with Margaret. She had just returned from one of her girls' retreats, which I later found out were just upscale gossip weekends in the Hamptons. She looked me up and down and said, "You've really found your place here, haven't you, Emily?" I smiled. "I have. It's starting to feel like mine." She laughed. "Well, let's not forget whose name is on the title." Daniel chuckled. I looked at them both, and for the first time, I wasn't angry. I wasn't scared. I was amused. Because they had no idea what was coming. After dinner, Daniel handed me a folder. "Just some documents I need you to sign, babe. Minor mortgage adjustments. Makes things easier when we refinance." I opened it. Inside was a legal form that would effectively remove me from the financial liability of the home, under the pretense of protecting me. But in reality, it was a trap. If I signed, I'd no longer have any legal rights tied to the property, and they'd be free to sell it or evict me whenever they wanted. I smiled and said I'd review it the next day. Then I took it straight to my lawyer. She read it, looked up, and said, "If you'd sign this, you'd be out within a month." I nodded. That's what I thought. The next morning, I told Daniel I needed time to think. He played it cool, said he understood. But I saw the flicker of panic in his eyes. He knew something had changed. What he didn't know was that the woman across from him was no longer the naive, trusting wife. She was someone else now, and by the time he figured out who she'd become, it would be too late. Some traps don't need bait. You just need to make your enemy believe they're the ones doing the hunting. And that's exactly what I did. After Daniel handed me the mortgage adjustment papers, the ones that would have legally erased me from the house, something in him shifted. He was lighter, more relaxed. He'd walk around in just a towel, whistling after showers. He'd hum while stirring pasta sauce. He even brought home flowers one afternoon and said, "For my favorite future ex-liability." He laughed. I smiled, because I knew he thought he'd won. But what he didn't know was that I had just bought two things. One, a new set of covert security cameras, the kind you could tuck into bookshelves and air vents. Two, a burner phone with cloud-connected backups set to sync automatically every night. The next phase of my plan was simple. Let them talk. Let them plan. Let them bury themselves. I placed the cameras in the study, kitchen, and living room. The house was full of conversation traps now, and within 48 hours, they began to speak freely, too freely. Margaret came over one afternoon with a bottle of red wine and her usual perfume cloud of arrogance. "I told you she'd sign anything if you smiled enough," she said, plopping herself onto the leather couch. Daniel snorted. "She's gullible, not stupid. I had to butter her up. A little romance goes a long way." They clinked glasses. "She'll be out of here before Thanksgiving," Margaret declared. I was upstairs, pretending to nap. In reality, I was watching the feed live from my burner phone with headphones in and my heart racing. Every word was a dagger. But I didn't bleed. I recorded everything. A few days later, I overheard Daniel on the phone again, this time with the mystery woman. "You'll get your cut. Trust me. Once she's out, the house sells fast. Hot market. Easy money." Pause. No, she still thinks we're fixing our credit together. Honestly, she's kind of pathetic. That last word, pathetic, echoed in my skull. He thought I was weak, gullible, replaceable. That would be his downfall. I began preparing for war. First, I transferred the LLC I'd created earlier into a trust under my sister's name. It was a shell company, technically, but it would soon serve a very specific purpose. Then I hired a private investigator. Not to follow Daniel, I didn't care if he was sleeping with someone else at this point. No, I needed info on the woman he was planning the sale with. Her name was Vanessa Quinn, real estate agent, divorced twice, no kids. Recently fined for an ethics violation that somehow never made it to public record. Bingo. She was just the kind of woman Daniel would trust. Beautiful, ambitious, and just corrupt enough to think she could outsmart a quiet little housewife. I scheduled a meeting with her under a fake name. Claimed I was a buyer interested in the property Daniel planned to unload. She met me in a downtown cafe, all high heels and confidence. "Vanessa Quinn," I asked, extending my hand. She smiled. "Yes, and you must be Jenna." "Correct," I said. "Cash buyer, no mortgage needed. But I want to make sure the title is clean before I go further." Her eyes glimmered. "It will be. The seller's wife is signing off soon." "It's just paperwork." "Oh," I smiled, sipping my tea. "I am the seller's wife." She froze. "What?" I leaned forward. "I'm Emily, Daniel's legal spouse. And unless I sign that title transfer, this deal you're conspiring won't go anywhere near escrow." Her mouth opened slightly. She blinked. "I don't know what he told you." "I have recordings," I interrupted. "Of your phone calls, of you discussing fraud, of Daniel talking about removing me through forged documents. Want to hear them?" I pulled out my burner phone. She reached for her bag, defensive. "I didn't know." "Oh, you knew. But here's the thing. I'm not here to destroy you." Pause. "I want to partner with you." She blinked again, slower this time. "What do you mean?" "I'll make this simple. Daniel's planning to screw us both. He'll dump you the second the house sells. You won't see your cut. I, on the other hand, can make sure you walk away clean, maybe even ahead." "What's your angle?" I smiled. "I want you to play along for 2 more weeks. Pretend like you're moving forward with the transaction. Let him believe everything's on track. I'll give you the green light to close. And just before signing, we shut it down legally. And then, you help me transfer the house into a corporate trust, mine. Through a loophole in the agreement Daniel signed a year ago, the house defaults to me if he attempts unauthorized sale without my signature. He doesn't know that clause exists." Vanessa sat back thinking. She looked at me differently now, not as a victim, but as an equal, maybe even a threat. "You really want to burn him?" she asked. I stirred my tea. "No, I want him to burn himself. I'm just setting the fire." The following days were almost theatrical. Daniel was glowing, excited, arrogant, distracted. He even suggested we go on a little trip after the house closes. I nodded and booked 2 spa sessions for us. One for him, one for me. While he was getting his massage, I visited the courthouse to file a protective order on all assets tied to the trust. I had a lawyer with me. The documents were airtight. If Daniel attempted to transfer, sell, or restructure without my written consent, the house would revert fully to me. He wouldn't even be able to touch the equity. Vanessa texted me every night with updates. "He's making promises he can't keep. He's trying to push closing to next Friday. He told me he handled the wife." "Oh, Daniel, you poor dumb man." Then came the night he tried to sleep with me, not out of love, out of calculation. He came home with wine, ran a bath, said he missed us, held me like he used to, told me he regretted how distant he'd been. I let him touch me, let him kiss me. And right as he was pulling me closer, I whispered in his ear, "I know everything, every call, every lie, every plan. And you're going to finish this just the way I want it, or I will bury you." He froze. I smiled. Then I got up, walked to the bedroom door, and said calmly, "Sleep downstairs tonight." He didn't come down for breakfast the next morning. Didn't go to work. Didn't even shower. The silence was delicious. He was unraveling. And the best part, I hadn't even started yet. Daniel didn't sleep in the guest room that night. He slept in his car. I watched from the upstairs window as he sat there in the dark, gripping the steering wheel like it held answers. His head bowed, hands shaking. That was the thing about control. Once you've had it, the absence of it feels like death. I didn't message him, didn't call, didn't check in. I wanted him to sit with the silence, to feel it claw at him. By morning, he was gone. I made myself coffee, watered the plants, and then sat down to open my laptop. The dashboard blinked back at me, all accounts secured, assets frozen, title locked. My lawyer had filed the asset protection paperwork at midnight. Daniel had no clue that his name now triggered legal holds on everything: the house, the bank account, the trust. Any attempt to touch, sell, or transfer would send alerts straight to my team. And I had just received the first one. 8 a.m., Daniel attempted to initiate equity withdrawal on property value. Status blocked. I smiled and took a sip of coffee. Game on. At noon, I got a call from my lawyer. "He hired a shark," she said flatly. "Eric Shaw. He's aggressive but sloppy, used to working with men who think they're untouchable." "Perfect," I said. "He'll underestimate me." She laughed. "He already did. His office called ours this morning, trying to challenge the trust clause. They didn't know it was updated last year with your signature alone. So they're scrambling. They're bleeding." By evening, Daniel finally came home. He looked like a ghost, pale, wrinkled shirt, jaw clenched. He didn't speak at first. Just paced the living room, eyes darting toward me, then away. Finally, he said, "You're making a mistake." I closed my laptop slowly and looked up. "Am I? This is our home, Emily." "No," I said calmly. "It's the trap you built. I just rewired it." He swallowed. "You don't want to do this." I already did. Then came the pleading. I was scared. The debt. The pressure. My mom kept saying we needed to protect the house. I didn't mean to hurt you. I stood up and walked toward him. "You didn't mean to hurt me," I repeated. So all those meetings with Vanessa were what? Therapy sessions, all those lies, the forged signatures, the gaslighting. His lips twitched. He was losing grip. I leaned in slightly and whispered, "You didn't just plan to kick me out. You planned to sell my future." He opened his mouth, but no words came. So I turned around and walked upstairs, left him standing there. The next day, Margaret arrived. I knew she would, and I was ready. She stormed into the kitchen like she still lived there. I was stirring soup. "You ungrateful little brat," she hissed. "Do you have any idea what you've done to my son?" I didn't answer. "You always acted like you were better than us. But without Daniel, you'd still be some office girl in a cubicle." I stirred once more, calm, quiet. "You think this house is yours?" She snapped. "It's not. You're not family." "You never were." That's when I turned around. "I know, Margaret, and thank you for reminding me." I pulled a folder from the counter and handed it to her. "What's this?" "Proof," I said, "of Daniel's wire transfers, the recordings, the emails, and a copy of the restraining order I filed this morning." Her eyes widened. "You're bluffing." "I'm not. And if you step foot in this house again without my permission, you'll be escorted out in handcuffs." "You wouldn't dare." I stepped forward, steady as stone. "I already did." She left, fuming, but not before spitting one last threat. "You'll regret this. Women like you always break when they're alone." I stood in the doorway and watched her drive off. Then I whispered to myself, "I've never been more whole." That evening, I met Vanessa one final time at the same cafe where I had exposed her. She looked at me wary. "Is it done?" "Yes," I said. Daniel's frozen, Margaret's out. You're clear. And him. I smiled. He still thinks he can recover. Let's give him hope a little longer. She sipped her drink. Why are you doing this, Emily? Why not just walk away? I looked out the window. Because I want them to feel what I felt. To wake up one day and realize everything they built was a lie. And worse, that the lie came crashing down because they underestimated the woman they tried to erase. Back home, I found Daniel in the backyard, sitting alone under the patio lights. He didn't look up when I stepped out. I still love you, he said. I stood there for a beat. No, Daniel, I said softly. You love what I gave you. The safety, the structure, the shield. He turned, eyes desperate. We can fix this. We can't, I said. But don't worry, I'll let you pretend we can. Just long enough for me to take the last piece of what you think you still control. Then I turned and walked inside. Behind me, the house stood quiet. But I knew, just like his lies, it was about to collapse. Some people fight fire with fire. I burned the whole blueprint. For days, Daniel tried to act normal. He'd leave for work like everything was fine, then come home early, hoping to talk. He brought wine, offered foot rubs, even started cooking again, risotto, steak, his so-called signature lamb chops. It was all theater. He knew I had him pinned. But he was betting on one thing. That love, or nostalgia, would weaken me. He didn't realize I had already mourned the man I thought he was. He died the night I heard him sell off my future over the phone. Meanwhile, I was busy deconstructing everything he'd built. First, the finances. I went through every account, line by line. Found the crypto wallet he thought I didn't know about. Transferred the funds legally because he had used joint money to seed it. My lawyer filed a financial recovery claim within the hour. Second, the assets, the cars, leased under the trust. I revoked his use authorization. The investments, split accounts that required spousal signatures. I blocked them all. Third, the identity. I updated all mail, IDs, passwords, even the damn Netflix login. Every trace of us was now just me. And then I went further. I reached out to his boss. Technically, I didn't need to. But I wanted to close all exits. Daniel had built a career off charm, handshakes, flattery, dinners with investors. But his recent activity, quietly siphoning off client bonuses into a private consulting firm run under someone else's name. Who, you guessed it, Vanessa. So I sent a little anonymous packet with documents, audio snippets, and transfer receipts to the corporate ethics department. Did I sign my name? Of course not. But the message was clear. He builds fake futures. Be careful who he builds them with. A week later, Daniel got suspended from work. He came home earlier than usual, no tie, just a blank stare. I was reading on the couch. They're investigating me, he said flatly. I didn't even look up. Should I be surprised? He paced. You've made your point. No, I said, finally meeting his eyes. I haven't even started. That's when he exploded. You think you're some mastermind. You think you're the first woman to try and ruin me. I'll bounce back, Emily. I always do. I stood up slowly. No, Daniel, this isn't about ruining you. It's about revealing you. I'm not pulling strings. I'm cutting the ones you used to tie me up. He threw a glass against the wall. Shards flew everywhere. I didn't flinch. That night, I found a box in the garage labeled College Memories. I hadn't opened it in years. Inside were old letters, photos, journals, a life I once thought was innocent, honest. The kind of life Daniel never really knew. I flipped through pages I barely remembered writing. One entry stopped me cold. I want to be the kind of woman who sees the fire and walks through it anyway. I laughed out loud. Somewhere, that girl had been waiting for me to become her. By the end of the week, Vanessa sent one last update. He's trying to shift the sale under another broker, but the title is locked, just like you said. He's scrambling. You want me to step back now? I replied, no, let him run. Let him sweat, but if he tries one more move, pull the plug. I also made one final visit to Margaret. She was living with her sister temporarily. I didn't care. I showed up unannounced. She opened the door, looking startled, robe clutched like a shield. "I don't want to hear it," she snapped. "You should," I said calmly, "because your name is still attached to the trust. Daniel made sure of that when he listed you as an alternate beneficiary." Her face paled. "You're bluffing." I handed her a document. It was real. "And because you co-signed one of the earlier amendments, the one where you insisted I take less risk. You are, unfortunately, just as liable for his financial misconduct." She gasped. "What do you want?" "Nothing," I said. "Just your silence and your absence." She closed the door without another word. The next day, Daniel sent me an email. Subject: one last conversation. I know I messed up. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But I just want to talk, not as enemies. 1 hour. No lawyers, no recordings, just us. I read it 3 times. Then I replied, subject: no need. You already said everything when you thought I wasn't listening. That weekend, I invited a friend over. We drank wine on the porch, laughed about old times, and for the first time in months, I felt free. Not because he was gone, but because I was back. 3 days later, Daniel's car was gone from the driveway. No note, no call, just silence. I stood at the window again, same spot where I'd once watched him sleep in that car, cold and cornered. Now he was just gone. No bang, no fireworks, just the quiet collapse of a man who thought he could control a woman without consequences. The blueprint was gone, the house still standing. But now every wall, every nail belonged to me. They say silence is peace, but sometimes it's just the calm before the storm you never saw coming. Daniel was gone. No text, no call, no banging on the door begging to talk. He simply vanished. His car disappeared overnight. His name was no longer active on our bank's login page. Even Vanessa confirmed he'd cut contact without a word. "You think he ran?" she asked me over coffee one afternoon. I shrugged. "He doesn't run, he calculates. If he's quiet, he's building something." At first, I welcomed the silence. I spent mornings opening windows, letting light in, playing music I used to love but had muted for years. Jazz, old soul. Music, Daniel said, made him anxious. I reorganized the closets, donated half the furniture, painted the hallway a soft sea green that made me feel like I could breathe again. And still, the silence stayed. Heavy, lingering. It was strange how deeply his absence filled the room. But peace wasn't the same as closure. One night, I went through the camera files again, the ones I'd saved when I first started spying on Daniel and Margaret. I told myself it was for protection, just to stay ahead. But deep down, I was looking for something else. A clue, a crack, a sign that maybe, just maybe, he once meant it. And that's when I found it. It was a clip from nearly 6 months ago. Daniel was alone in the study, drunk, talking to himself. The camera caught only fragments. Didn't want it to go this way. She was never supposed to sign that clause. Margaret made it messy. Too messy. He paused. If she ever finds out, it's over. Then he laughed a bitter, hollow sound. But she won't. She's too kind, too trusting. That's the real joke. He was wrong. I had trusted, but I had also remembered. And now, I couldn't forget. The next day, I received a plain envelope in the mailbox. No return address. Inside was a single page. "You think it's over. It's not. There's one more signature I need, and I always get what I want." No name. No handwriting I recognized. Just a photocopy of one old document I hadn't thought about in months. Our prenup. Back when Daniel proposed, we'd signed a prenuptial agreement. It was casual, rushed. I barely remembered it. It was one of those things he brushed off with a kiss and a joke. Just something my mom insisted on. It won't matter anyway. But now, it did. I dug it out from the safe box and laid it flat on the table. The legal jargon blurred into one long paragraph until I found it. Clause 14B. Upon full ownership of shared residence, both parties must mutually agree on any further title redistribution, unless one party has defaulted via marital misconduct. It looked harmless, until I flipped to the appendix. There, in small, faint print, was a condition Margaret had slipped in, probably during our rushed engagement party weekend. Misconduct shall be defined exclusively as infidelity, abandonment, or financial betrayal provable by documentation from an independent witness. My stomach turned. I had the proof, but I had never presented it officially. And Daniel knew that. I called my lawyer. "This clause," I said, "can it be weaponized?" She hesitated. "If he's preparing a claim of misconduct against you, possibly. He'd need to show financial negligence, or argue that you acted in bad faith with your asset protections. But he's the one who tried to sell the house behind my back." "Correct," she said. "But if he manipulates the language, claims you iced him out without cause, or that you moved joint assets without notification." She trailed off. "He could delay litigation, tie you up for months, maybe years." That night I couldn't sleep. The silence was no longer comforting. It was watching me. I went back into the garage, pulled out the last unopened storage bin. Inside were more old boxes, ones I thought I had sorted years ago. That's when I found it, an old USB drive marked proposal papers. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity beat caution. Inside were drafts of the prenup, dozens, early versions, scans, some annotated by Daniel, others by Margaret. One file stood out. It was titled, "Margaret Final PDF." I opened it, and there it was, a note written in Margaret's handwriting, scanned and attached to the contract. "Make sure this version gets signed. Don't show her the full appendices. She won't read it anyway." The date, 3 days before our wedding. My hands shook. I copied everything, every file, every note, every timestamp. Because this wasn't just betrayal. It was premeditated deception. The next morning, I contacted my lawyer again. "This isn't just fraud," I said. "It's coercion. She tampered with a legal agreement and he knew." Her voice tightened. "Then it's time we stop reacting and go on the offensive." 3 hours later, we filed a motion to invalidate the prenup, citing procedural deceit, lack of full disclosure, and evidence of conspiracy. My lawyer moved to freeze any litigation Daniel might attempt based on the document. Vanessa, surprisingly, called me that afternoon. "He's staying in a motel by the interstate," she said. "Word is, he's going to file an emergency claim to gain temporary control of the house." I paused. Let him try. That evening, I walked through the house, barefoot, alone. The silence was still there, but this time it wasn't watching. It was waiting, and I was no longer afraid of it. It started with a knock, not a loud one, not the kind that demanded attention. It was soft, almost timid, like someone pretending they still had permission to enter. I opened the door slowly. Daniel stood there. His eyes were sunken, his hair a mess. In his hand was a manila envelope folded twice. He didn't speak at first, just held it out. "What is it?" I asked, already knowing. He swallowed. "Emergency petition. For injunction and temporary control of the house. Court hearings in 3 days." He waited for a reaction. I didn't flinch, didn't blink. "All right," I said and took the envelope. "Let's go to war then." 3 days later, we stood on opposite sides of a family courtroom. He had a lawyer. Suited. Expensive. Smug. I had mine. Calm, brilliant, deadly in heels. The judge was a gray-haired woman who looked like she didn't have time for theatrics, exactly what I was hoping for. Daniel's lawyer went first. He painted me as erratic, emotional, financially manipulative. Claimed I had removed Daniel from joint access to his home, his funds, his identity. Claimed I had isolated him, weaponized privacy laws, and destroyed his ability to provide for himself. "He was left with no choice, Your Honor," the lawyer said. "Ms. Rhodes has made it impossible for my client to exercise basic autonomy within his marriage." This request is a temporary measure to protect his share of the marital estate. The judge turned to me. Ms. Rhodes, how do you respond? I stood. My husband didn't just plan to sell our home out from under me, Your Honor. He conspired to do it with the help of a third party. Without my knowledge, without my consent. I have recordings, emails, witnesses. The judge raised an eyebrow. And the prenuptial agreement. I nodded. Your Honor, we filed to invalidate it, based on new evidence of pre-signature manipulation. Fraud. She leaned forward. Do you have this evidence now? My lawyer handed over the file. Inside, Margaret's handwritten note, the altered drafts, the timelines, all of it. Daniel's lawyer reached for his copy, scanned quickly, and blanched. This is highly irregular, he muttered. No, the judge said. What's irregular is how many of you think you're smarter than the system. She paused, then looked at Daniel. You'll retain access to your personal belongings, nothing else. The property will remain under joint protective trust until this is resolved, and until then, you are not to approach Ms. Rhodes without legal notice. Gavel, decision made. Outside the courtroom, Daniel caught up to me. You just made this worse for both of us. No, I said. I made it fair, that's what terrifies you. He looked away. Then quietly, you're not who I thought you were. I stepped closer, met his eyes. I know, that's why I'm still standing, and why you're about to lose everything you built off my name. Over the next week, things moved fast. The court approved a forensic audit on Daniel's accounts, based on the trust violations and hidden assets I'd flagged. My lawyer pushed for full discovery, forcing him to reveal every account, investment, and transaction for the last 2 years. Vanessa sent me a final voice memo. He tried to get me to scrub my emails. I refused. I told him I've already testified in writing. He said you de-ruin us both. I told him you already saved me. I didn't reply. She'd done her part. That was enough. Meanwhile, Margaret tried one last stunt. A letter, handwritten, left in my mailbox. You may have one for now, but women like you always end up alone. I didn't even finish reading it. Instead, I scanned it, signed my initials at the bottom, and filed it in a folder labeled Unsolicited Advice from Bitter Women. Then I dropped the physical copy into the fireplace, watched the edges curl, watched the flame erase her voice from my home. Then came the biggest surprise of all. My lawyer called. Her tone, for once, was cautious. Emily, the audit revealed something we didn't expect. What is it? There's another account, offshore. Cayman-based, but it's not in Daniel's name. It's in yours. I blinked. What? I never. It was set up 3 years ago, after your wedding, with money funneled from Daniel's investment firm. I froze. Are you saying he laundered money under my identity? Yes, and if we don't act fast, this could get ugly. For the first time in weeks, I felt fear. Not panic, not defeat, but fear. Because Daniel hadn't just tried to erase me. He tried to frame me, and that meant he wasn't done. I thought I had seen the worst of him, but Daniel still had one more move. And this time, it wasn't about the house. It wasn't about money. It was about ruin. I stared at the screen as my lawyer clicked through the bank records. Offshore transfers, disguised wiring trails, a shell company tied to a consulting business under a generic corporate name. Each document had one horrifying thing in common: my name. I didn't recognize the account. Didn't recall ever signing for it, but the signature it matched, flawlessly. He forged it, I whispered. Didn't he? My lawyer nodded grimly. Most likely, but it's clean, not a smudge out of place. Can they trace it? We're working on that, but Emily, this isn't just shady. This is federal. If this gets reported before we prove forgery, you could be investigated for financial fraud, wire fraud, tax evasion. My chest tightened. And Daniel? She hesitated. If he stays quiet, he walks away clean. But if he hands this to the right people before we act, you'll be the name they come for first. For the first time in this whole mess, I felt cornered. All the power I had built, all the strategy, the foresight, none of it mattered if the law didn't believe me. If a forged document said I was guilty, proving I wasn't would be like trying to scream underwater. I didn't sleep that night. I just stared at the ceiling, wondering what kind of man thinks so far ahead. What kind of man lays the trap years in advance? And then I remembered. The investment trip he took 2 years ago, a 3-day stay in the Caymans with his team. He brought me back a necklace, said he'd been thinking of me the whole time. Now I realized he'd been building a bomb. And I was the name on the trigger. But fear only works if you stay still. I was done standing still. The next morning, I met with a forensic document analyst. A woman named Rena, sharp eyes, no bullshit. She took one look at the signature and said, "It's a match, but that doesn't mean you signed it." "How can you tell?" She pulled up a side-by-side. "Your actual signature has micro tremors, natural muscle tension. This one is perfect." "Which means it's copied." "Copied how?" "Digitally traced, likely from a scan, then printed cleanly onto a contract." I stared. "So he didn't just fake it, he cloned it." Rena smiled grimly. "It's more common than you think. But I can prove it with time." Time was the one thing I didn't have, because Daniel had already made his move. 2 days later, I got the notice. Subject: Notification of Preliminary Federal Financial Inquiry. Entity: Emily Rhodes. Filed anonymously. I was being investigated. No charges, not yet, but the clock had started. And Daniel, he was still out there. I did the only thing I could. I went hunting. I started with old phones, email accounts, burner numbers I used during the early stages of my surveillance. One login still worked. There it was, an audio file I had almost forgotten, dated 8 months ago. It was Daniel on the phone, talking to someone he called Leo. "It's done. Cayman account's live. I used her credentials. If anything happens, she takes the heat. She'll never know. She's too busy decorating. She'll never look twice at an offshore account." I pressed pause. That was it. The admission. The intent. Now I just needed to verify it. Rena rushed the audio to an audio forensics expert. They confirmed the voice, confirmed the call. And best of all, the timestamp proved it happened after the account was created, not before. I handed it all to my lawyer. "Can we beat this?" She looked at me and said, "We can't just beat it, we can end it." We filed a countersuit, not just for fraud, but for malicious identity theft. Daniel was now facing federal exposure, but we didn't stop there. We also submitted the evidence packet to the original investigators of the financial inquiry, quietly, carefully, through proper legal counsel. And just like that, Daniel was no longer anonymous. He was now the target. Days passed, then a week, then 2, and then the phone call came. My lawyer's voice was calm but satisfied. "They're opening a case on him, officially." What happens next? They'll freeze his travel, seize any unreported assets. If they find what we think they'll find, he could face up to 10 years. I didn't speak, not because I was shocked, but because I finally understood what real justice felt like. That night, I stood in the kitchen and poured a glass of wine. The same kitchen where he once held me from behind, whispering sweet lies. The same counter where he left contracts for me to sign, smiling like he had nothing to hide. And now, I stood alone, but I wasn't broken. I had burned his blueprint. Now I was writing mine. The courtroom smelled like old wood and quiet judgment. Rows of pew-like benches. A single raised podium. And in the middle, Daniel, in a navy suit 2 sizes too big, hair slicked back, eyes that no longer held any confidence. He looked small. It was the first time in our entire relationship that he didn't look like the man in charge, because he wasn't. The trial was swift, the evidence was stacked, the timeline tight, the audio recordings damning. The federal investigators had moved fast once the offshore account was linked to Daniel's IP address. They traced the funds, tracked the paper trail, verified the forgery. It all pointed to one conclusion. Daniel had tried to bury me under a crime of his own creation. My name was now cleared, officially, but I wasn't here for that. I was here to watch the world he built collapse, brick by fraudulent brick. Margaret didn't show up. Neither did Vanessa. He stood alone. His lawyer tried the usual angles: stress, manipulation, desperate financial situations. But the judge saw through it all, especially when I took the stand. I wasn't supposed to testify. My lawyer warned me it wasn't necessary, but I needed to. For me, I took the oath, sat down, looked straight at Daniel, and spoke. Daniel Rhodes didn't just betray me, I said. He didn't just forge my name, or hide money, or try to kick me out of my own home. I paused. He tried to erase me, not just from paperwork, from my own life. The room was silent. He counted on the idea that I wouldn't notice, that I'd be too trusting, too soft, too naive. He built a world where I was the background character to his empire. I turned to the judge, but I refused to disappear. Daniel wouldn't look at me, not once, not even when I stepped off the stand and passed by his table. The man who once kissed my forehead every morning couldn't even meet my eyes now. I didn't need an apology. I already had the truth. The verdict came after a single day of deliberation. Guilty on 3 counts of wire fraud, 2 counts of identity theft, 1 count of attempted financial coercion. The judge recommended sentencing of 9 years federal time, with restitution owed to me in full. Daniel's lawyer asked for a reduction. The judge declined. Outside the courthouse, a reporter approached. "Ms. Rhodes, do you feel vindicated?" I looked past her to the steps of the courthouse. I saw Daniel in handcuffs being escorted into a black vehicle. For a moment, our eyes met. His were bloodshot, hollow. Mine weren't angry, just finished. "I don't feel vindicated," I said finally. "I feel free." That night, I sat alone on the back porch of the house I had fought so hard to keep. The air smelled like summer. The kind of night where we used to drink wine and pretend forever was guaranteed. But forever, I'd learned, is something you have to build yourself. I poured a glass, toasted the stars, and whispered into the dark, "Goodbye, Daniel. You didn't break me. You built me." The courtroom smelled like old wood and quiet judgment. Rows of pew-like benches, a single raised podium. And in the middle, Daniel, in a navy suit 2 sizes too big, hair slicked back, eyes that no longer held any confidence. He looked small. It was the first time in our entire relationship that he didn't look like the man in charge, because he wasn't. The trial was swift, the evidence was stacked, the timeline tight, the audio recordings damning. The federal investigators had moved fast once the offshore account was linked to Daniel's IP address. They traced the funds, tracked the paper trail, verified the forgery. It all pointed to one conclusion. Daniel had tried to bury me under a crime of his own creation. My name was now cleared, officially, but I wasn't here for that. I was here to watch the world he built collapse, brick by fraudulent brick. Margaret didn't show up. Neither did Vanessa. He stood alone. His lawyer tried the usual angles: stress, manipulation, desperate financial situations. But the judge saw through it all, especially when I took the stand. I wasn't supposed to testify. My lawyer warned me it wasn't necessary, but I needed to. For me, I took the oath, sat down, looked straight at Daniel, and spoke. "Daniel Rhodes didn't just betray me," I said. "He didn't just forge my name, or hide money, or try to kick me out of my own home." I paused. He tried to erase me, not just from paperwork, from my own life. The room was silent. He counted on the idea that I wouldn't notice, that I'd be too trusting, too soft, too naive. He built a world where I was the background character to his empire. I turned to the judge, but I refused to disappear. Daniel wouldn't look at me, not once, not even when I stepped off the stand and passed by his table. The man who once kissed my forehead every morning couldn't even meet my eyes now. I didn't need an apology. I already had the truth. The verdict came after a single day of deliberation. Guilty on 3 counts of wire fraud, 2 counts of identity theft, 1 count of attempted financial coercion. The judge recommended sentencing of 9 years federal time, with restitution owed to me in full. Daniel's lawyer asked for a reduction. The judge declined. Outside the courthouse, a reporter approached. "Ms. Rhodes, do you feel vindicated?" I looked past her to the steps of the courthouse. I saw Daniel in handcuffs being escorted into a black vehicle. For a moment, our eyes met. His were bloodshot, hollow. Mine weren't angry, just finished. "I don't feel vindicated," I said finally. "I feel free." That night, I sat alone on the back porch of the house I had fought so hard to keep. The air smelled like summer. The kind of night where we used to drink wine and pretend forever was guaranteed. But forever, I'd learned, is something you have to build yourself. I poured a glass, toasted the stars, and whispered into the dark, "Goodbye, Daniel. You didn't break me. You built me.